Hello everyone, we hope you're all doing well. Welcome to one more video presented to you by Insights IAS team as part of your InstaEthics, a GS4 initiative. In the last video, we discussed the basics of attitude. We will expand on those basics in this video. We will discuss what are the purposes which are served to us by the attitude we hold. After that, we will discuss the various factors responsible for the formation of attitudes in our life. Why there is a dissonance or mismatch between our thinking, that is attitude, and behavior, and how we can influence a person's attitude. All these 4-5 topics that we are going to discuss is very important for you from your exam perspective, both in section A as well as section B. So please pay attention to it. And if you have not gone through the basics of attitude, I request in fact to go back to the earlier video on attitude and just have a look at it. Let me first start with the functions of attitude. The first function, right? What is it? Many people, before I talk about that, many people started to think, what purpose do these attitudes serve us? Many people give multiple answers. But there was a thinker called as Daniel Katz. He told that whatever attitudes we have, we can classify them under 4 parameters and we can analyze it. The first purpose served by attitude is utilitarian function. What is this utilitarian function? We hold certain attitudes because when we hold them, they serve certain utility for us. Utility in the sense, increase our pleasure, minimize pain. Such attitudes which serve this purpose or utility, we call them as utilitarian function. What is the example of this? You tend to not break the laws because you're afraid, you're fearful of punishment if you break the law, right? You tend to wear a helmet while riding a bike. You tend to maintain social distancing protocols or wear a mask or get yourself vaccinated because you're fearful of any pain that might be caused in your life if you don't follow all these things, right? All these are utilitarian functions served by the attitudes you're using. One more thing, One Belt, One Road initiative. Now this One Belt, One Road initiative, it's an ambitious project of China. All of you know that. Many countries are participating in this project. Why are they participating? They're participating because they think their participation will win them rewards or pleasure. They're not thinking the whole picture, right? There are certain loopholes in the project which can push a country into the brink of economic crisis, something which we are seeing in Sri Lanka. I'm not saying all the problems of economic crisis of Sri Lanka is because of this One Belt, One Road initiative, but significant amount is because of this, right? Anyways, we won't get into that. I just wanted to explain what utilitarian function is through an example. All these attitude, my friends, they don't work just at an individual level. They work at different levels. Always remember that. One more thing. Whatever you study now, you should always be able to link to what you have studied or what is happening in our country. What you are seeing in our country is that there is a politician, or there might be various politicians that you might have read of, who moves from one political party to another political party to another political party. We see this happening. This trend happens at union, at the state level as well. Why does it happen? Does it happen because there is an ideological change in the politician? Absolutely not. They tend to hold these attitudes because they believe that they can attain or obtain better rewards when they change from one political party to another, right? Moving on. The next thing is ego defensive mechanism. The moment I say the term ego, we all tend to think about it in a negative manner. Nothing wrong with that, because if you have a very heightened notion of ego, it will harm others. That is the context in which we have used ego in multiple scenarios of our discussion. But all ego is not wrong. Having some ego is good, because it is this ego which gives you a sense of your own self. It gives you a sense of self-worth, an identity for you. And what Daniel Katz says is, there are certain attitudes which are explicitly used to safeguard this self-worth, to safeguard this self-esteem. Those attitudes serve ego defensive purposes in our life. They help us to protect our self-worth, even when we have done something wrong. We tend to find rationalization for our actions which make us feel guilty. For example, when you are in a UPSC coaching process, your faculties will give you homework, you yourself will give you targets, but more often than not, you don't tend to follow up on your targets, you don't tend to implement your plans. What is the reason behind that? Multiple reasons, right? But you tend to find rationalization or excuses. You tend to say, today the weather was not so good, I'll finish the topics which I have left before and then I'll come to this, because if I don't do that, what is the purpose? The whole purpose of writing the answer. You tend to give all these excuses. Why are you doing so? You're doing so as to protect your self-esteem, right? Because you're seeing others doing better. And if you don't protect your self-esteem, your mind will go through a psychological harm. To prevent this, you have certain attitudes which help you to safeguard your self-esteem. This is at a common level, right? This is something that you might have experienced in your life as well. At a larger level, what is the example that I've chosen? I've chosen the example of Brexit, right? Many people believed that United Kingdom moving out of European Union was correct. They had this attitude. And why did they have this attitude? They said migrants were coming and looting cash, jobs and whatnot, right? Apart from that, okay, they also believed that whatever was wrong with United Kingdom was because of their participation in European Union. But all those were just excuses, with just denial and projection. The real reason was UK did not invest enough amount of money in upskilling and reskilling its population. It did not invest enough in creating diverse employment opportunities. There are many reasons like that. Instead of acknowledging those things, they denied it. All right? They came out with their own set of excuses to justify, to protect their own self-esteem. Brexit is an example of that. Last year, USA pulled out of Afghanistan. Everyone knew, including USA, knew that what they did was wrong. But they still came out with rationalization saying that they wanted to invest their resources in the Indo-Pacific region. They said that Afghans were the ones who had to decide where their country went. Whatever money, time they had invested since multiple decades was all lost within a matter of few months or days, right? Why did USA did not acknowledge its failure? Because they wanted to protect their self-esteem, their own self-worth. And this is not the first time. You have seen this happening during the course of Vietnam War as well, right? Many such examples exist, my friend. The next thing is value expressive function. Some attitudes that we hold bring out the values that we hold dear to us. These attitudes help us in two important reasons. One, they win us social approval from the people around us, right? And why do you need this social approval? It helps you to make yourself a better person, right? Along with that, it also helps you to achieve the broader objectives if you're part of an organization. As a leader, if you showcase certain values, your colleagues might be tempted to follow such values, right? That is the reason why many people hold such attitudes based on positive values. The other important thing is these attitudes, they help us to understand who we are, what we stand for. They help us in the self-discovery process. Okay, self-discovery. This was one important term which was asked by UPSC in last year's essay. Self-discovery. Attitude helps in this. Such attitudes which help us to get social approval or which help us to understand who we are, by giving us a platform to expose our values, our core values. Such attitude serve the purpose of value expressive function, right? Remember this. And who is the person that I've taken for this as an example? G.R.D. Tata, right? Tata is a company. The products of Tata are those which Indians tend to trust a lot, that Indians tend to have a greater amount of respect, because when you look at their working ethics, they have not just emphasized on profit. It's profit as well as people. It's sustainable and inclusive growth of not just the company but also the country as a whole. The amount of diverse activities, social activities that the company has involved itself in, because of all these founders, they are on a different scale altogether. It is this values, it are these attitudes which has won social approval for not just the business leaders but for their companies, for their policies as well, right? Value expressive function. For an administrator, this is very important. All right, is it not? Right. Moving on, the last function or purpose that Daniel Katz say with respect to attitude is knowledge function, right? We tend to interpret or analyze what is happening in and around us. We tend to think and feel based on how we process the knowledge that we get. When we were growing up, climate change was not a very big thing, it was an opinion. But now knowledge, that climate change knowledge is a fact. It's not an irreversible process, it is happening. We can reduce it as much as possible. We can't reverse it completely to zero, but we can reduce it. That is why you have Paris Climate Change Agreement. That is why you see India's attitude towards climate change being so ambitious, so positive. In the sense, we have come out with National Hydrogen Mission, is it not? We have come out with emphasis on generation of solar energy, with emphasis on reducing coal as much as possible. Right? We've even gone ahead and said in the Glasgow summit that by 2070, India is going to be a net zero carbon emitter. Knowledge influencing our attitudes, right? That is an important aspect. Over here, I just want to convey one more thing. Knowledge could be based on size, knowledge could be based on religion, knowledge could be based on social media posts and whatnot, right? Here that knowledge is not particularly constrained to any one domain, okay? And remember one thing, when you take 10 attitudes in a person, all these 10 attitudes, you can't classify them under one head, right? The attitude a person holds might be a combination of one or more functions or purposes. It might serve the knowledge, for some it might serve their ego, some utilitarian, okay? So there is no strict way of classifying each and every attitude under just one function or purpose. It is a mix, a combination. But even in this mix or combination, there will be a higher priority, right? That if you identify, then you can use it to change the person's attitude in a positive way. Alright, we'll talk about this at a later point in time. Okay, next, I've taken these three terms: prejudice, stereotype and discrimination. Prejudice and stereotype, they are related to attitudes. That's why I took them up. What is a prejudice? A prejudice is a preconceived attitude. Even before you are engaging with that person, an object or a process, you have this attitude preemptively that it is wrong, that it is negative. Such preconceived attitude is what we call as prejudice. Now, based on this prejudice, sometimes what happens, you tend to allocate a generalized behavior or pattern to a set of people belonging to a group. When you do that, that becomes a stereotype. What is a stereotype? A stereotype is a generalized belief about a particular category of people. When I talk about Britishers, they had this racial prejudice that they were superior than all other races, right? And they showcased this in the way they worked as well. They stereotyped Indians as lazy and lethargic. They stereotyped Hindus as conservatives. They stereotyped Islam people in the same way. And unfortunately, these stereotypes, instead of being tackled and combated, we are still continuing that, right? Moving on. When you act on the prejudice and stereotype and showcase them in your behavior, that is when you face discrimination, right? Discrimination is behavior, all right, based on stereotypes and prejudices, right? When you try, what is the example of this? You have gender prejudice. When you are trying to put the blame on an accident on a woman, even though she has done nothing wrong, you are acting on the stereotypes, right? If you are preventing a person from getting a job because he or she is from a particular community or caste, then you are acting on your prejudice. Whenever you act on stereotypes or prejudice, more or less it leads to discrimination, right? Always remember this. Prejudice, stereotype, and finally discrimination. The next thing is formation of attitude. Now most of these factors, I have spoken about it in the earlier classes, so I'm not going to go and discuss them in a deep manner, right? The first one is experience. When you look at Gandhiji, the experience of racial attitude that he faced when he was in South Africa was a turning point, all right, in his life. He gave up his commercial enterprise and he took up the cause of fighting for Indians in South Africa and later in India. In Ashoka's life, it was Kalinga War which changed his attitude from violence to non-violence. Buddha's life, when he went outside the palace, when he saw the sights of an old age person, a person with disease, a person begging, right, a dead person, and also finally a person who was a monk. This experience was what made him to give up his royal life and take up an ascetic life. You all know that, right? Experiences. Social factors, the culture that you're born into, the religion that you're born into, all right, the time that you're born into. All these things can cumulatively affect your attitude. When we were growing up, the attitude that we had with respect to alternative lifestyle was rather traditional or conservative. But now when we are living in a society where we are exposed to multiple ideologies because of emergence of social media, the kind of education, there is a lot more acceptance of alternative lifestyle that could also be based on social factors, classified under this. The other thing is conditioning. Here there can be two types of conditioning. One is classical conditioning, the other one is operant conditioning. All of you would have come across the story of this dog, all right, Pavlov's dog, that is what we call this experiment as. The dog, usually when it was served food, there was no indication whatsoever that it was being served food. Used to just call the name out of the dog went and had the food, that's it. But what this Pavlov did was, before giving dog the food, he started ringing a bell. After ringing the bell, the dog was given the food. And this was done over the due course of time. At a later point in time, the moment the bell rang, the dog started to salivate. It started, its mouth started watering. Right? This is what you call as classical conditioning. The bell brought about a behavior in the mouth of the dog. It associated the bell with food. This is called as classical conditioning, where the participant himself or herself is not aware that their attitude and behavior is being changed. Can I use an example from real life? Yes, I can. Social media. You're all part of the social media experiment where our process, our thinking process and behavioral process are either getting changed for the better or for the worse. Rather, it is the latter in recent few years, knowingly or unknowingly, is it not? Right? classical condition. This is what classical conditioning means. Then you have one more called as operant conditioning, where your attitude and behavior is changed based on a system of rewards and punishment. If you score good marks in your exam, I will buy you some gift. If you don't score good marks, I will punish you. I will make you study for even more time. Right? Rewards and punishment used to change the attitudes and behavior of people. Right? Operant conditioning and observing. This is important, is it not? When we are growing up, we observe our parents, we observe the society in which we grow, we observe our family members, role models, and we tend to pick certain attitudes. When I was growing up, right, there was this incident of Kargil war, and eventually we started reading more about it. We started reading about the sacrifices which were made during the course of this Kargil war. That did have an effect in terms of changing my attitude towards certain things, bringing about changes in my value system. Like that, you might have come across so many other things, right? The other thing is media. In recent years, there has been a growing controversy in terms of posts made on social media, in terms of popular art such as cinemas. Why so much of controversy? Because a movie can be used to change your attitude towards certain things. It could either be for better or for worse, right? And in recent times, media is being used as a propaganda tool for just that purpose. And this is creating a lot of controversy. You don't have to mention any films or posters or anything like that, but just talk about how media can change or help in the formation of attitude. When I was growing up, there was a film called as Laksh. In this film, you had Hrithik Roshan. He was a youth who was directionless, but eventually he finds a direction, he becomes part of the armed forces. There were many youths at that point in time who were influenced by this movie, and they did take part in the armed forces, right? Media helping in the formation of attitudes. The other thing is literature. Now when you're learning about world history, you will learn about World War I. Now before the World War I, historians analyzed now what were the reasons for World War I occurring. They found a reason in literature as well, because apparently before World War I, war was seen as a sign of courage, as a sign of strongness associated with a country. Involving in war was celebrated, right? Eventually, when you look at war, the literature that we saw after two world wars, it highlighted to what extent there was pain, humiliation for all the wrong reasons. The nature of the literature changed. Where war was celebrated couple of decades ago, to war was being condemned in whatever way possible, right? Literature can help us in the formation of attitudes. Mahatma Gandhi ji was influenced by John Ruskin, Leo Tolstoy. All of you have read about it, right? These are not all the factors that help in the formation of attitude, but the most important ones, okay? The next thing is cognitive dissonance. In the earlier video, I told you, usually attitude and behavior go hand in hand. They are in sync. But there are instances where they are not in sync. Right? What is the example? You might have come across people who would have involved themselves in love relationships. But these relationships might not have translated into marriage, right? Due to reasons such as caste equations and religious equations not matching. You might have wondered, why is it that these people who are educated and literate are not going ahead with their decision? The reason being, still to a very large extent, our attitudes are formed and are practiced based on social factors, that is, religion. When you marry out of your caste, out of your religion, the social stigma, the psychological harm that you face, right, your parents face and your kids will face, will be quite high. This psychological harm, because of this psychological harm, even though they believe in caste equality, in religion equality, they tend to behave in manners which are traditional in nature. to reduce this psychological harm for themselves, for their parents, for their future kids, they completely give way to a behavior which is not in consonance with their attitude. This is what we call as cognitive dissonance, right? And this happens at multiple levels. Okay. Moving on, the next topic is social influence and persuasion. Now, what is this social influence? It is the quality that a person has in terms of influencing a person's attitude, behavior, thought process. Persuasion is the process of influencing a person. That's it. In persuasion, you are using certain very energetic communicative tools, very diverse communicative tools, right, to achieve the social influence. Now, there are multiple theories, my friend, that you have to know about how to persuade a person, provided you were a psychology student. Fortunately for us, we are learning this as part of GS4 ethics paper. Now, the crux of all these theories, you can put them under three important characteristics. If you follow these three important characters and the parameters related to it, the persuasion process will become successful, right? What is these three parameters? This is also called as elaboration likelihood model. We won't get into the much more details of it, right? Anyways, coming back, the first one is audience characteristics. You need to understand what is motivating the audience, why they hold that attitude, what purpose is that attitude serving them. That is one thing. What are the factors which are responsible for that individual having that attitude? That is second thing. Is it based on emotion that they're holding that attitude? Is it based on logic? Is it based on experience? All these aspects. You need to understand pakka the thought process of your audience, right? Once you understand the audience characteristic, the person who is trying to persuade them, all right, should also be, okay, having certain characteristics of their own. They should be open to active listening. That is one thing. The source should also have high levels of ethics and integrity. That is second thing, right? As long as the source does not have that, let us say a person who was involved in an accident, you take that person and you make him a brand ambassador for a safety related initiative, people will not be persuaded by it, is it not? Right? The source involved in persuasion should also be of high ethical and moral character. Okay? The person should understand the audience in a better manner. If the audience is emotional, how to connect with them emotionally. If the audience is logical, how to provide that logical knowledge. All these things should be there in him. Finally, you have cognitive tools used. What kind of tools you are using? Okay, what kind of media you are using? Literature are you using? Social media, right? All these tools that you use collectively to persuade a person, right? It should be based on how the audience receive it. Some audience might tend to receive it better if you use religious examples to persuade them. Some audience will tend to receive certain things or issues when you present them or when you use the tools of technology. A source should understand that and should choose accordingly. When you take all these parameters into mind and then you go for this persuasion process, then the probability of that persuasion becoming successful is quite high, right? Please remember this, right? Moving on, I just want to give one example for this. I've already spoken about it in the last video, that is Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. And this Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, we analyzed why some people have more emphasis on hygiene, why some people have less emphasis, what is the religion angle, the gender angle, and then we used all sorts of tools available, be it social media, be it the popular films and cinemas, right? Multiple ones. And we focused on the source as well, from the President of India till the common man. We celebrated those people who gave their contribution towards hygiene improvement. All these things collectively helped us to achieve success in Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, is it not? Right? Please remember that example. Now, In the last video, I gave you a question related to positive attitude. I'll just tell you what should be the framework for that question. A positive attitude is considered to be an essential characteristic of a civil servant who is often required to function under extreme stress. What contributes a positive attitude in a person? Over here, they're asking you, positive attitude is important for a civil servant, particularly in India where he is working in extreme stress. There is no question there. They're asking what factors contribute to such positive attitude. Alright? Remember, in the introduction I have told you, don't always go with the definition approach. Try to understand the essence of that question, the importance or the significance of it. If you don't have a positive attitude and you have a negative attitude, you're creating negative perception in the minds of the people about the administrative machinery in the country. This can have a very devastating impact on the trust of the people on democracy itself, right? That you can capture in your introduction. What are the various factors which are responsible for developing this attitude? Okay, here I've given personal environment, professional environment, the kind of value system, education, hope, courage, or you can just write this. You just have to justify how some experience result in positive attitude, how social factors can contribute to positive attitude, how conditioning, how observing media and literature. What are the factors which contributes a positive attitude in a person? You can go with that. In the conclusion, right, you can suggest in what ways we can give emphasis to such positive attitude in the minds of our civil servants. When you talk about Mission Karma Yogi, is one recent policy of the government where we are emphasizing in our offices to showcase such positivity, to showcase courage in their decision making process. There have been many instances where the Prime Minister of our country, where the Honorable Supreme Court themselves have come forward and told the officers not to take decisions because of fear of law until and unless your action is upholding the constitutional values. Positiveness trying to be built through programs and through encouragement, through motivation as well. Right? You can capture all these things in your answer. Right? Now there is one question which was based on attitudes again. Right? What was this question? This is something related to what we discussed today. How could social influence and persuasion contribute to the success of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan? This is for 10 markers. This question was asked when Swachh Bharat Abhiyan was initially conceptualized, but as of now you realize that Swachh Bharat Abhiyan has been a success, a relative success compared to Total Sanitation Campaign and Nirmal Bharat Abhiyan. What factors resulted in how the social influence and persuasion was used in this question, in this policy? You have to capture that in your answer, right? Please do write an answer. And there was a question by one of our students whether you can post answers. Yes, you can post your answers. You can post them on our YouTube comment section if possible. If not, on our website, okay? You can go to that website. There is a link that we create after every video is posted. We will also be giving you notes in that link. Below that, there will be a comment section where you can post your answers, and we will be very happy to evaluate some of those answers and tell you how generally you can improve, right? Thanks for your time. Hopefully you will take care of yourselves.